This is the third and last video on the Gay Vikings series by this guy you can see in the picture. His channel is called Norse Magic and Beliefs, and I'm doing a, shall we say, fact check series on all of his 3 episodes on the sources he's using. So if you've seen the first 2 videos, you know that this is not a reaction video to him or his channel. I'm only looking at the sources he's using and what they actually say. So let's not dwell too much upon that, because this is going to be a long one. So let's go.
That being said, that does not mean that I'm okay with people lying about my ancestors. Some people say that not only was gay relations accepted during the Viking Age, but they go as far as to say it was encouraged. My past 2 videos have proved that was not true, and this would be the final piece of evidence, so those people can shut up on their Reddit groups and they can keep getting pissed off at me. So, going.
People never shut up on Reddit groups. I don't use it myself, but all over social media, people will always keep talking about things they don't understand. That's just the way it is.
Over for some sources here. First, we have to understand the Old Norse word "neath." There are tons of cognates and parallels to this in the Old Norse language that we find all over the sagas: Nithing, Erigi, Rager, Strothin, Surthin, and others like that. They're all nouns or adjectives basically referring to an effeminate man who was cowardly and had some association with being the passive part in a male-on-male sexual act. Or
No. I didn't really get that. It said you have to understand the word need, and then it goes on about Erigi and Strolin and stuff. Nothing to do with it. Need is basically shame. You call shame on someone. That's need. A needing is, or a need mother was a shameful person that should be shamed for being whatever. That could be shameful. So need is shame, basically.
or even male-on-beast sexual act. And this was the absolute worst thing that you could call someone in the Viking Age.
Yep.
This would have been the equivalent to today's 6-letter F word that we're not allowed to say anymore, times 100, okay? We have many law codes from the Viking Age, and afterwards that deal with this word. It was illegal to call someone this in many places, and you can basically have the legal rights and obligation to kill someone if they called you any of these words.
Oh, that's not really true. In the old law of the West Geats, it was actually a part of a punishment to call out someone as a needing. So, no, that's not really true. And kill someone, I don't really agree with that. The law said that it was illegal to defame someone if you didn't have reason for doing so, or you could back it up with facts and witnesses. That's important to remember. These old laws were very dependent on witnesses. The older laws said that any kind of defamation would have to be proved or settled by a fight called a holmgång. Basically a man-on-man duel to the death. Like the oldest fragments of the West Geat law, the Västgötalagen. But that law doesn't mention specific words. That law just said that if someone shames you without, or calls you something, or accuses you of something that is not, can't be proved, then you have the right to challenge him in a duel to the death. And that law says that if the man who shamed you doesn't show up, then you're won. Then he is what he has shamed you for being. So if someone calls you unmanly, and you call him, you say no, I'm not, and you challenge him to a duel, and he doesn't show up, then he will be considered unmanly by law, and so on. So yeah, that was a kind of a death penalty of sorts, not necessarily, but could be. But defamation is the thing, and it wasn't that you weren't killed for defaming someone. You were excommunicated was the punishment that we know of the written text. And defamation was a very big thing during this part of the Iron Age. If you decided to insult a Norseman of any kind, then you would have to prepare to fight for your life, basically, because that wasn't accepted. And the first mention that we have of this is from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles in the year 787. Some say 789, but that's because of the change of the calendar. Danish men from Herdaland or Hordaland or land of robbers, probably merchants, came to England. Don't really remember where that was, but probably have a text somewhere. And they were looking for the marketplace. Because they were traders, and they were traders a long time before they were started to be called Vikings. They were just Danish men or Norsemen, merchants, basically. They were armed, of course, and when they came into England, they met this guy called Bedherd, I think. And that guy treated them as lower humans, basically. That was an insult, so they killed him and his men. That's what happened. The Saxon Chronicles say that Bedherd didn't recognize them as marauders, but they weren't marauders, they were traders, and they just reacted to the the shaming insults that he treated them like cattle, not men. That's probably what happened, because that was the Norse way. But back home, maybe they had more patience with that kind of treatment, because they could always bring it to the ting and sell the score at the ting. And they also had something called blood fine that could be paid for such things. That's another story. But insults and defamation was not accepted by any of the Norse peoples. So, but the common punishment for it was either to pay fines or be excommunicated, meaning that you were an outlaw in that land or that country or that area. That was and when you were outlawed, that was a time-limited punishment. So you had a safe time for a couple of days, maybe a week, that you had to pack up and leave. And during that time you were protected, but after that time period, you were basically free game for anyone to kill without getting punished for it. So in the long run, yes, excommunication, if you didn't leave fast enough or at all, then you could be killed. But the killing wasn't a punishment, that was a result of your actions according to the punishment. So that's not really true that you could be killed for it. And excommunication was a very common punishment for many things. So if you shook someone hard, as the law text says, you could be excommunicated. So it was a common offense, and shaking someone and calling them something insulting was the same thing. It was a matter of honor. That's what it was. So it has nothing to do with sexuality or need or anything like that. But anyway.
The video here goes into specifics on that. Just this tells us pretty much all we need to know about the perception of being gay, or especially being the passive part of a same-sex act. This was damaging to your reputation, and you can see what the general society probably thought about it. We see a couple funny examples that I'm going to go over here in the sagas, basically hurling homophobic slurs and insults at each other in the heat of a deadly fight. In Ljósvetninga saga, Thorkel and Gudmundur sling very creative and poetic insults at each other, as you can see here as they fight to the death. Your ass has been penetrated by streams, but it maybe hasn't seen milk before. Is referring to the sperm, of course. Another.
What? No. Ljósvetninga saga is not about sperm. In your mind, pal. This is the part of the story where Thorsten the Violent, or Hinrami, that's my translation of it. You can always correct me if I'm wrong. I gladly accept corrections if you're right. He went against Gudmundur in a fight with a man named Thorkel. So Thorsten, Thorkel and Gudmundur were in a fight, as it seems in a basement of some sort. Thorkel was wounded, but he wasn't less aggressive because of his wound. His guts were hanging out. That's what's going on here. A fight with swords. And Gudmund falls back from a slash from Thorsten. And when he falls back, he falls into a barrel of milk. And Thorkel saw this and smiled, saying, "I don't know how long your ass was wet, but I don't think you've been drinking milk before." And then they kill him. So it is very clear that it is a barrel of milk. And if you read this story thinking that someone had barrels of sperm standing around in the basement, there might be something wrong with you. Milk was used for making mead. Milk and honey, basically. So lots of milk. So they had barrels of milk standing around. There's absolutely no logical reason in any universe that anyone would have barrels of sperm standing around. That's just ridiculous.
Another, in Njál's saga, Flosi and Skarphedin are insulting each other at an Althing, and even attack Flosi's father for being feminine because he had no beard. He was the beardless Carl. The two part ways there, but they would have a violent rivalry for the whole rest of the saga, so you couldn't just call people these things and insult their manhood. So we don't have to analyze this
In the case of Njál's saga, or Brenne Njál's saga, or whatever you want to call it, Flosi is making fun of Njál for being beardless, but he is also defended. So he is very wise and knowledgeable in everything, and is very helpful. He helps everyone, and he also is not late to revenge someone if his help is needed. So he is defended with how manly he actually is, and how many children he has, and all such manly things. Men without beard were basically seen as unmanly, because women don't have beards and men do. And the Viking Age men were very they cared very much about how they looked. Appearance was very important to them. What clothes they had, what beard they had, everything like that. And to this, we have to add that the Christians that came to Scandinavia did not have beards. They were called the shaved ones, and that's not their heads, that's their faces. They didn't have beards. It's a Christian thing not to have a beard. So that basically made them women in the eyes of the Scandinavians. And that's one reason for them having a hard time being heard and respected up here. So yeah, being beardless is definitely an insult to a man. But then when you have people that can defend you with how manly you actually are, with having many children or a great wife, or being an honest and truthful man that's very dependable, then you don't have to be insulted, basically.
Too much. This doesn't necessarily reflect hateful, evil, homophobic people necessarily. This is just how guys who really, really don't like each other talk to each other. We all did it. I'm old enough to know, many of you guys are old enough to remember, even as a little 10-year-old kid growing up, before we get into a fight with each other, we would be hurling these types of insults at each other and homophobic slurs, just like in the Viking Age, just like humans in every culture did throughout history. It's just simply humans, something that humans did up until about 15 years ago when it was no longer appropriate. We're just not allowed to talk like that anymore. But basically every single culture has these types of insults, these types of homophobic insults, the worst insults to insult their enemies. It doesn't necessarily mean that they had all this hate for gay people in that particular society. It's just the most offensive thing that you can call a straight man who fancies himself a badass. People think that a distaste for gays in culture specifically stems from Christianity. There's this idea that Christianity doesn't approve of gays, and that
I just want to say that what's going on the screen here, that's not on my side. That's his original video. There's a link down down below that you can watch it yourself. That's not me.
automatically means the pagans of gays, and that is a total load of shit with no evidence for it whatsoever. As a matter of fact, in the sagas, the Viking Age sources, all the accounts of any homosexual acts in any of the Viking sagas were done by Christians, okay? In Gudmundar saga, when Gudmund has sex with a man, this is the only clear attestation of any same-sex relation in any Old Norse source. That's the only source that goes into like detail of what happened. There's a couple other sources too, but they're attesting this same event where Gudmund, in his quest of revenge, captures his enemy, his rival, and also his wife, and he plans for them both to be, we can't say the word there, but it's the four-letter R word. So Gudmund directs one of his men to penetrate the captured prisoner, and he was viewed as the Nithing, the passive one in this gay sex act. And this one example is what has made people today argue for same-sex relationships in the Viking Age and in the Norse religion. But guess what? The saga is called, the full name of the saga, people always leave that out. The full name of it is called Pressaga Gudmundar Bishops, the priest saga of Gudmund the Bishop. It was a saga about bishops. 200 years after paganism was outlawed in Iceland, Gudmund was not a pagan.
No. 200 years after Iceland was Christianized. Pagan beliefs were not outlawed on Iceland. That's it's a rare thing that happened there. Christianizing a country meant that the bishop could report to the Pope that they had conquered a country of heathens, pagans. So Christianizing meant that Christianity was the official religion of that country or people. But at that thing in Iceland in 999 or 1000, sources vary, but probably 999, it was decided that there were so many people that did not want to convert to Christianity. So they decided that the official religion of Iceland would be Christianity and everyone should be baptized. But in their own homes, they could continue practicing whatever religion they felt like. And they also kept some stuff like putting out children and eating horse meat, which is a very pagan thing that the Norwegians and Danes accused the Swedes of. Even in the 16th century, they called them horse eaters. Very tasty meat, actually. They kept some of the pagan practices, but the official religion was Christianity. But if someone practiced something pagan in plain sight so that people saw it or it was witnessed, that was outlawed, and that would lead to excommunication. But as long as you kept your pagan religion practices in your own home by yourself, that was totally fine. But officially everyone on Iceland was Christian, so they did not outlaw pagan beliefs or faith. That's a misconception.
Pagan, he was a bishop, none of his friends were pagan, none of his men were pagan, none of his family, no one in that whole story was pagan. All Christian, so that's that. Another one with a slight kind of suggestion of homosexual acts. Kristni Saga, the name speaks for itself.
And you can read about that thing in 999 in Kristni Saga, so it's all there. If I had continued reading that, then he would have seen that. I probably didn't.
Thorvald and the bishop in this saga are accused of being in a homosexual relationship, with Thorvald being the catcher, and jokingly he is said to have birthed 9 children in their relationship, and they were both looked at negatively by the whole community in that saga. So it wasn't just the catcher who was looked at as an effeminate man in those times. Even during official Christian times,
No. A suggestion is that when you use a source like that, read it. Thorvald and Bishop Friedrich came to Iceland, and Thorvald was a newly converted Christian who went along with the bishop to Christianize Iceland, or the people in Iceland. The story goes that the bishop asked Thorvald to speak to the people at the Ting, when the Ting time came, about Christianity. And Thorvald went up on the mountain or hill, and he talked to the people about this new religion, trying to get them to convert. Before this, they had spent some time in Iceland converting people and baptizing people. And while he stood there talking, a man came into the crowd, or stood in the crowd. His name was Hedin from Svalbard. And he was interrupting him, commenting on what Thorvald said. Mocking him, basically. And at some point in this event, he asked a poet or skald to make a nidvers. That's a rhyme of shame, you can call it, about the bishop and Thorvald. And the skald said, he thought a while, and he came up with, "Children has the bishop carried 9, to tell to them all Thorvald is the father." And this guy interprets that as what he said. The 9 children is referring to the 9 people they had baptized and converted so far. So, but anyway, Thorvald is angered by this and revenge this shameful speech by killing 2 people. Doesn't say who. No one seems to react to this at all, but the bishop asked him, "Why did you kill those 2 people?" And Thorvald said that, "I killed them because he accused us of having children together." So he, as a Norseman, took this as an insult. And the bishop replied, so they did, but that's only words. You should have let him speak. For me, it would be an honor to have your children." And he's talking about the children of God. The newly Christians were called children of God. So the 9 children were the people they had baptized so far. And the bishop says that, "I would gladly take insults as long as you keep bringing me new children," meaning new Christians or converting new people. That's what the text is about. He's kind of, sort of accusing them of some kind of gay relationship. But the children he's talking about, and the skald's poem, is about the converts, the baptized converts, not actually them having homosexual intercourse and having babies. And the bishop is not saying, "I would gladly be impregnated by you." That's not what he's saying. He's saying, "I would be honored to have your children," meaning the people that you are doing so good at converting for me and the church. That's what it means. That's the message in the story. So, yeah, you can read it yourselves. It's there. It's available.
This was the case during pagan times. Again, I reiterate, there is no evidence whatsoever of any gay act that took place in pagan times. They might have been. I'm sure. I'm not saying it didn't exist. I'm just saying we have no evidence of it. So what happens is the scholars have dug into these sources and invented subtle little innuendos out of nowhere to argue for their agenda. One comes in Gisla Saga. Here, Gisli and Thorgrim are playing a ball game, and the scholars take this one line that you see here and suggest a sexual connotation to it. Gisli caught the ball and hurled it between Thorgrim's shoulders, and scholars, some of them, some very bad ones, suggest that this is alluding to oral sex because the word ball was used in other sources in the Old Norse language to refer to penis sometimes. So instead of cherry-picking quotes to fit the mainstream academic agenda, I'll just leave this full text here so you guys can see for yourself. Okay.
Yeah, cherry-picking, that's going on a bit here. If there is any scholar, who has used this phrase to indicate sexuality because the word ball is in this text, stop now. Do something else, because you're not good at this. If you missed this context, then just quit. Do something else. Go watch birds in the forest or something. The original word in the story is knatre, and that's ball. Knattleker is a ball game. It means ball game, basically. Thorgrim and Gisli are 2 brothers. Important. Not lovers, brothers. They were competing to find out who was the strongest. And everyone knew that Gisli was the strongest. But he always held back when he was playing games with Thorgrim, his brother. So Gisli tackles Thorgrim so hard that he hits the ice. It's a game played on ice. He hits the ice and his knuckles has the skin ripped off. He has the meat torn off his knees and his nose sprang open, gushing blood. It's a very violent game. He didn't hold back this time because it was... as someone told him, we have to know who's the strongest, so don't hold back. So he didn't. So, and then Thorgrim says, the spear went into the wound, I cannot blame it. And this is the poetic side of this story. And then Gisli takes the ball and he throws it so hard at Thorgrim that he falls over forwards. And the word used is stapitst áfram, falling, he fell forward. Not how can you fall forward and have your legs in the air? That's just a very hard thing to do. And then Gisli says, the ball went in his back, I cannot blame it. There are different versions of translations of this. That's the one I use. So this is a power display with a ball game called Knattleiker. It was a ball game. And the brothers, as I said, were very strong. Everyone knew that Gisli was stronger, but he was asked to not hold back this time, so he didn't, and this is what the story is about. And if this context is not obvious for someone reading this text trying to translate it, it's a ball game. He picked up a ball and threw it in his back. I don't know how you can translate that to something other than a ball in a ball game. And the word in this specific sentence is boulder. And boulder is a word, that's a homonym that can be used for many different things. Boulder can be used as a ball, as a football, baseball, a ball. It can also be used as the ball, as a dance in a ballroom. And it can be used as balls, as in genitals. But again, context. The context decides how you translate this word in this text. So if, as he said, some scholar saying that Gisli ripped off his genitals and threw them so hard at his brother that he fell forwards. How is that logic? How are you reading this text, if that's what you think? So, I don't know where you get your sources, but that's a ridiculous version of this story. Just as ridiculous as a barrel of sperm standing around in someone's basement.
Gisli and Thorgrim, I highly doubt that they would have brought the whole town there to watch a ball game in the middle of an icy field, playing a violent game with blood gushing from both of them, so that they can end the game by sucking each other off in front of the whole town, you know?
Or by ripping off the genitals, throwing it so hard at each other that they fall over.
Get a life. This is what university scholarship has come to some people going over this source. And
I just can't believe that someone would be so stupid as to do that kind of translation and actually publish it. Please tell me that's not true.
Their theses. So, another one. that the scholars dig into is in Fjorsbredra Saga. Again, it's about Christians in the early 11th century, but it's close enough to pagan times to reflect some societal values of pagan culture in Iceland at the time. Again, the scholars take a little line here and make something gay out of it. Apparently, as Twyrdmundur, as they say, tells the story of when he killed another man the night before in the heat of the fight. They're getting to each other. Twyrdmundur apparently found some time to pull the other guy's pants down as he was underneath him in the river and have anal sex, as some scholars translate this to and suggest happened. But as usual, take a look at the full text from the scene and you can see for yourself. There is not a translated version of this to English, so it's only in Old Norse and Icelandic. I'm pretty good, but I'm not good enough to translate it 100% correct, so I used a little bit of AI help here. But anyone who else is proficient in Icelandic or Old Norse, feel free to add your thoughts about what this text exactly says. I'm not sure what that ass gaping strangely over the water quote means. No idea about that. It could be some sort of slang where the guy is maybe shitting himself before he's about to die. I don't know. Either way, I don't think a man that is almost fatally wounded himself as he was fighting another man would consider a trip down Hershey Highway while they were both bleeding out in the river. So, a final one comes.
Again, please tell me that no educated scholar would translate this text so ridiculously wrong. Again, context. This part of the Fjorsbredra saga is about two people, Tormod and Falgeir. They are having a fight in the water with axes, chopping each other to pieces. Tormod has been cut with Falgeir's axe, and I think it caught it in his neck or his shoulder or something, so he drops his axe. So he drops his axe and he feels powerless. And one of the big things in this story is that at that moment he thinks of King Olav, who is now a Christian and basically a saint, and hopes for spiritual help. That's a small bit of text in the story, but it's in there and it's important. It tells us a lot about what the story is about. But when he thinks of King Olav, Falgeir's belt breaks in his pants. So he starts to drop his pants. Tormod sees this and uses the opportunity to pull Falgeir's pants down, so he has a hard time maneuvering in the water, so to speak. So Falgeir goes up and down in the water because he can't swim, because he's trying to get away from Tormod at the same time that his pants are down by his feet, so he can't really swim, and he's losing his breath, going up and down in the water, and at one time he comes up ass first in the face of Tormod. And when he comes up for the last time and sinks, he has this his face, now he's dead already, but his face is stuck in a kind of a grim smile, terrified grim smile. And when Tormod comes up out of the water, he's asked what happened, what's going on in the water. And then he makes this verse, this poem. I floated on the fjord, the fool died without reputation. His asshole gaped kind of weirdly towards me. All the gods despise the sword storm's coward's ull. With open eyes he almost laughed. Because he was a bit confused about this. But that's what it's about. It has nothing to do about anal sex or two people having sex in the water in the middle of an axe fight to the death. It's just ridiculous. He just remembers this part of the actions, just his bum coming up at him, and then he turns around in the water with his deathly grin, and that kind of gets stuck in his mind. So that's the story he tells. It's definitely not about homosexuality or men being naked together. But the Fullspelare saga, is one of the Icelandic sagas that has a particularly bold language in it. And that's pretty rare in the sagas to have that kind of language. So, yeah. But no, I hope there's no scholar anywhere that can translate text so horribly bad that they would publish something like this. I just don't want to accept that as a fact. I just think you found a weird translation somewhere. Maybe your AI didn't translate it right, but you don't have to have an English. There's both a Norwegian and a Danish version of this. So if you're Norwegian, you can read it in your own language. I don't know. But well.
In the Gesta Danorum that some of the scholars allude to as well, the men named Osvith and Åsmund, they were great friends and they were blood brothers. Both of them had wives, by the way. No homosexual acts are attested in this account, but by all accounts of it, they loved each other very much. And some of the acts in there may seem a little bit sus in our modern eyes. For example, when Osvith died, he and Åsmund agreed that Åsmund would lay with him in his burial mound for 3 days. And as at that point, a Swedish king came upon him 3 days later, and Åsmund told him the story of how he, went to the realm of the dead and struggled fighting against the undead and all this stuff that you see here. And that event is also told about in the story of Egil One Hand and...
this is not a story about love in the sexual way, as in making love. It's about brotherly love. This is about friendship. One of the characters is Åsmund. He is, in the story, he's engaged in some kind of hunt. He gets lost somewhere. They tell about how he's wandering around, lost in the woods, surviving on mushrooms. That's a big part of the story. And as he's wandering aimlessly, he comes to King Björn and his court. King Björn has a son called Åsvid, and these two boys, or young men, find each other in friendship, and they become so good friends that they promise each other take an oath to never separate from each other, because they become very good friends. And they say that they make a promise that whichever of them lived the longest should be buried with the one who died. That's an oath. And Åsvid dies of an illness, and he's buried in, it says a cavern in the earth, but probably a mound or a barrow, with his horse and a dog, which is not an uncommon thing. And Åsmund, he honors this oath of friendship, so he has the courage to be buried with him in this barrow. And they put down food and drink for him. to survive a couple of days, maybe. When this has happened, the King Erik, or king of Hälsingland and Lapland and Finland, I believe, he was riding with his men from some battle to another battle, probably. He rode past this barrow, and his men thought that, oh, this barrow must be filled with gold and silver and treasure. So they open the barrow and lower a man down to find the treasure. They lower him down in a bucket, I think it says. And when Osmund, who is still alive, probably barely alive still, in the barrow, sees this, he throws the man out of the bucket and climbs in the bucket himself and gets out. And herein comes the quote that they had. But this is not about sexuality whatsoever. The message in this story is underlined by the text saying, because of his oath of friendship, he has the courage to be buried in the barrow with his friend. So this is about blood brothers. And the same kind of blood brotherhood is between Odin and Loki. They are also blood brothers. And that means that no matter what your brother goes through or what is accused of or what happens to him, you have sworn an oath to defend him and protect him. And if one dies, the other one dies too, in some cases. It's just a sacred oath. That's what it is. And oaths meant something in these times. It was basically illegal to break an oath. And you swore an oath to the gods. And if you were an oath breaker, then you were basically useless, a worthless piece of crap that nobody would even talk to. It was the worst thing you could be, a liar and an oath breaker. So if you swear an oath like this to someone in like a blood brother relation, then you honor that oath, no matter what. And this is what this story is about. It's not about him laying with him in the barrow in some kind of biblical way. They're just buried together, and they underline his honoring of this oath and his courage to be buried with a dead person in a barrow. That's what it's about. So no sexuality whatsoever.
Osmund, Berserker Slayer. So this is pretty much identical to other sagas that we have accounts of, where the hero goes into the burial mound of someone who is dead and he fights the Draugr in there. So the undead, like the zombie, we can...
No. This story, the Egil Saga Einhända and Åsmundar Berserkarbana, that's basically the same thing as the previous story with this sacred oath between brothers that's not really biological brothers. The story goes that they swore this oath to each other that they would the surviving one would be buried with the dead one as an honor to him. I don't know if it says 3 days or if it says just be buried with him. I don't remember. But this was probably a thing back then, as many stories mention this. And the story goes that the first night, Aran raised from the chair. Aran was the dead one. So he comes alive. And he's buried with a hawk and a dog. So Aran comes to life. He raises from the chair and killed the hawk and the dog and ate them. So this is basically the dead coming alive, killing his the funeral gifts, the hawk and the dog, and he ate them raw. The second night, Aran raises again and he kills the horse that's been put in the grave. And he gnawed it violently and ate it while the blood was dripping. That should be a horrible sight to see for a live person, when the dead comes alive and eats a horse raw violently. The third night, Osmund got sleepy and fell asleep and didn't notice anything until Aran grabbed him by the ears and ripped them off. Osmund took his sword and cut Aran's head off, and then he took the time to burn him again to ashes. And then he was hauled up of the barrow, and he took all of the valuables in the grave with him. So this blood bond, or this holy sacred oath that they had sworn, was about friendship and brotherhood. But when Aran do these horrible acts that he did, and when the hawk and the dog and the horse are killed and eaten, he goes for Osmund. And when this happens, this oath has been broken, so Osmund gets out of the barrow. He doesn't have to honor his promise anymore. But I don't know how anyone could find something about sexuality or homosexuality in this kind of story, because this is again a story about sacred oaths and how you honor them, but also tells when you're allowed to break that oath without bringing shame or need on yourself, which is what Osmund does here. Aran is not the same person anymore in death, so he can break his promise without being shamed for it. That's what it's about.
Equated to. It was the belief that after this happened and one came out victorious, the living would come out of the burial mound with a newfound power or wisdom or something like that, or a new sword or something. You saw this in the Northman movie. It also...
Oh, jeeps. There are many stories about why you should not take weapons from a grave mound. It could bring you new powers or some kind of new power, but that was always bad if it came from stolen weapons in a barrow. And it would basically always lead to your death or very bad future for you. So yeah, and the Norseman movie, or the Northman, is not a source. It's fiction, and I know it's been praised above the skies for being so correct and all of that, but that's not what I saw when I watched it. I saw fiction based on someone's interpretation of old stories that they probably didn't understand, and made a fiction movie about it. So no, not don't bring the Northman into this. But you should not open a grave mound and take weapons from it. It would not bring you any good whatsoever. It was extremely bad luck.
So, no doubt reflects some sort of underworld journey that people really did, some type of shamanic underworld journey. Many cultures...
This one's full of good stuff. Overinterpretations, basically. The stories have sometimes hidden messages. Of course they do. Sometimes they are suggesting spiritual journeys and things like that. But for the most part, these stories convey basic messages that are easy to understand. Nothing complicated or spiritual or shamanistic or anything like that. I don't even think the Vikings during their time had shamans. They sometimes consulted the Finns or the Sapmi people as shamans, but they didn't have any of their own, I don't think. Not that I found anyway. He's reading a bit too much into this. The stories tell that the dead don't belong with the living anymore. And when a man dies, he's not the same as when he was alive, and he should be mourned and remembered, but you have to let go of the dead. Let them be dead in their world, and you remain in your world. That's basically that's the deeper meaning in these stories. It's not about spiritual shamanistic rituals. So, no.
Cultures in the world believe that the living, if the living could like meditate or sleep around a recently deceased person, then that deceased person's soul comes out of their body, and the living persons could send their soul with them and accompany that dead spirit into the underworld and afterlife to gain some wisdom. I cover.
Why would you want that? Why would you want to go to the underworld with the dead? What wisdom could you possibly gain from that? I think he's confusing this with another ritual that Odin was said to do, and even some other persons did this even into the Middle Ages. When there was a hanging, you could sit below the hanged man or woman, and their knowledge would in some way pour down on you, and that way you could gain some wisdom or secret knowledge or something that only the dead could. But that was done when they died, not after they were dead, because the dead basically leave their bodies straight away and go to where they're supposed to go. So no, that's not what this is about. It is true that some cultures do have journeys to and through the underworld to gain wisdom and strength and manliness and some kind of manhood ritual things. In Greece, Egypt, places like that, yes. Probably even more other cultures. But we didn't really have that here. The Norse people kept as far away from the dead as possible. There are many stories of how to get rid of the dead that has come back, and how you get them to return to where they belong. There are many stories about the dead coming back, and advice on how to make them return. There are basically no stories about this kind of shamanistic spiritual journeys through the underground. I don't think that existed here. And in this story, there's no indication whatsoever that Osman got any of Aran's wisdom. he got away with his treasure that was buried with him. He was disgusted by what Aran as dead had become and decided to kill him a second time, and this time he burned him to ashes for him to really be dead, to not come back. This is also an old theme with dying once is one thing, dying twice or dying 3 times is to make sure that they never come back. So there's no indication of anyone getting some kind of wisdom or spiritual journey or anything in these stories. And I very much doubt that there was that kind of shamanistic journey in the North in the Viking Ages. There's a story when the gods go to Hel and try to get a person back, but they don't really gain any wisdom from that. So I don't think that indicates any kind of such journey. So no, you're overthinking this.
All that in this video here. As for the rest of the story and their bromance, I think that's all it is. You know, today whenever 2 dudes are really close to each other, we joke and we call them gay. But this was not an uncommon thing in ancient cultures. They really had a lot of love for each other. You can read any of the old sources. Even going back as far as World War II, World War I, especially men, brothers that fought with each other on the same side. They had such great love for each other, saying, "Oh, I love you with all my heart. I would do anything from you," or like cutting yourselves and mixing blood together and becoming blood brothers. This has...
Yeah, true. But that's not the sexual kind of love, like homosexuality arising between men at arms. That's another kind of bond, another kind of love. Every kind of love isn't sexual, so that's an overinterpretation.
This bromance has largely disappeared from our cultures today, but
I don't think so. I think that any soldiers in war find these kind of relationships with some of his comrades in the battle. I think this is the same today as it was 1,000 years ago, and it's not about sexuality whatsoever.
Ancient humans, really up until about 70-80 years ago, very much had this love between brothers. You didn't have to be gay, but you know, you guys can believe whatever you want about that. I won't go too much more into it. Before we finish, it's worth noting Seider. We have 2 accounts of men doing Seider in Laxdärda saga and also Gisla saga, which Seider, most of you know already, but we can equate that to something similar to shamanic type ritual type magic, and there was some sort of sexual shame, especially if a man was engaged in this activity, and they were referred to as Neath as well. They were probably not up there on a Seider.
I have to stop him again. Yeah, the Gisle Sirson saga, we had Torgrim Nebb, we've been through that in previous episode. And then we have Laxdala saga with Kotkel and his wife and his son with the interesting name Halbjörn Grindstone Eye and his brother. Immigrants from the South Islands, meaning the Hebrides. Yep, those 2 we have. And there's nothing demeaning about any of this. These are honorable people that are held high in the community. So nothing demeaning at all. And this is talking about the Seider as female is a very common misconception that has got stuck in people's heads for some reason. Seider was probably used by both men and women, but I think Seider is only the collective name for different kinds of magic or rituals. or ceremonies. I think there's a lot of things inside. It's the altar magic, there's chanting and casting spells and singing and all kinds of things. I think some of the things, like singing, I think we went through this in the last episode, maybe, that was female. Some parts of some of these kinds of magic were performed by females, mainly. And for a man to do the female version of the Seder wasn't good. But I think it was the other way around too. The females should stick to their kind and not leave the male version, not use that. So there was all kinds of things in Seder. Seder isn't one thing. We have description of these Seder females. That they had special clothing like a coat of fur and ribbons of blue cloth and things like that. A man shouldn't wear that because that would be wrong. But there's nothing in these stories that says that the men did wear that. So it's just they were magic practitioners. So Seder in itself is not female. Seder is another word for magic user or magician or sorcerer. Seid is many things, just a collected name for it. Like magic, could be all kinds of magic. You can't say that magic is male or female. It's a collection of different things. And need is not connected to Seder. It's not the same thing. Need is shame, and Seid is sorcery. So there's two totally different things. And a man doing female Seid could be shamed for that, but not for doing Seid itself. Because one can be the other, but not the other way around. So if you understand that, like a Volvo is a car, but not all cars are Volvos. Same thing. That's a very common misconception that Seder is female strictly, but that's not true.
Platform in front of the whole village having gay sex with each other. The reason scholars have suggested there is some connection with Seder to Need, is that this shamanic art maybe had to do with some feminine type of dance or convulsing uncontrollably, like we see in many shamanic cultures. And possibly the act of getting possessed by a god or a spirit. When
I don't understand this. Scholars is talking about which ones. I want to know who did that connection and why. I want to know who. So I'm confused. I haven't seen that anywhere, and I've done research on this for most part of my life. I've not seen that. That hasn't been disputed, I should add.
When you engage in Seder, so that spirit could communicate through the Seder practitioner, and this was viewed as being penetrated by a god or spirit, which is maybe okay for a woman, but very shameful for a man if that happened. That is the proposed theory, at least, and I covered that in this video here, why there was some sort of sexual shame attributed to a man performing this, but it was not necessarily him doing gay sex in front of the whole town. Final thing. How about lesbians? We should speak about a bit of lesbian stuff. So we have nothing alluding to women getting together sexually at any time during the Viking Age. What we do have is a couple of scenarios in laws, various law codes, or in Viking sagas, where a woman, if she dressed like a man, if she wore pants or other male clothes, that her husband had the right to divorce her. And also the woman could divorce her husband if he wore a low-cut shirt, for example, or other womanly clothes. For example, in Vatnsdæla saga, The husband specifically wanted to divorce his wife, but he needed a reason to. You couldn't just divorce someone for no reason, you need a reason to. So the husband tricked his wife into wearing pants, and she got pissed off when she found out, and she tried to kill him for this because her reputation would be so slandered if that happened. We also have a long...
No, that's not what the saga says at all. I think he confused the Vatnsdala saga with the Laxdala saga, which is the story that contains Gudrun saga in Laxdala saga, 13th century. There's no threats to kill anyone in this story. It's about honor and shame, as usual. In this story, a man named Tord Ingusson asked Gudrun, the wife of Gestur, where he lived at the time, if she knew what a woman put herself through when she was always wearing pants like a man. She answered him that the same could happen as if a man dressed like a woman. In both cases, a divorce is valid. Tord is outraged, and he asks Gudrun, what should I do? Because his wife, Aud, is wearing pants for some reason. She's called Trouser Aud because of this, or Brocköder. And he feels that this is embarrassing. What should I do? He's tried to talk her into not wearing pants, but she keeps doing that. I don't know why, but so should he divorce her and lose the support from all the powerful men? Because this was a very powerful man. He was a lawman. And if he divorced his wife for invalid reason, he would lose the support from the other powerful men in the area, in the thing. And lose their support. That would mean that he couldn't be a lawman anymore. And he didn't want to risk that. And she answers that a coward's problems is best handled at night. Meaning that a coward doesn't act, but a brave man acts. That's what that means. And Tord, knowing that being accused of being a coward was the worst thing that could happen to a man in his standing. So he goes straight to the Law Mountain and calls out his divorce. From this moment I am divorced from my wife Aud because she dresses shamefully like a man. So he doesn't trick her into wearing pants and she gets pissed and threatens to kill him, or no. That's what happens. She's just casually wearing pants and he doesn't like it. So he proclaims his divorce because she is shamefully dressing like a man, and this is a valid reason for divorce. So he saves his own reputation and honor. The story previously tells of the same Tord and the same Gudrun in the opposite situation, where Gudrun asked him for advice on what to do with her husband Torvald. When they married, he promised her to give her all the jewelry he wanted, but after they were married, he didn't bring her all the jewelry that she wanted, because he basically breaks his promise, and she doesn't like that. As I said, breaking oaths and promises were a very big thing in these times. He is also a very unmanly man, so he probably shaves his face or something like that. And he lies, and that's unmanly too. He lied when he promised her jewelry and then didn't bring her any. So Tord then gives her the advice as a lawman that she should make him a shirt with a large opening around the neck, so that he looks like a woman, because that would be reason enough for her to divorce him legally. And in the in the previous story, she just gave that same advice back. And this story tells that it wasn't okay for a man to dress like a woman or a woman to dress like a man, because that would be a valid reason for divorce. And divorce in this time consisted of proclaiming before 12 or more witnesses that I am now divorced from this person because of this reason. And that was it, then you're divorced. So if this was a law or just a custom is hard to say, because I haven't found it in the law books anywhere. But if it had been law, then any of them could have told their spouse that, you know, that I can divorce you if you don't change this, and that would be the end of it. But that's not what happened. So I don't think it was law. And it doesn't have to be law to be a valid reason. That's just a custom, an accepted custom. It doesn't have to be law. It's an unwritten law, as we call it. So yeah, that's what that story says, and he didn't read it because he got it totally wrong.
In the Griegos law codes, the Stadarhol's book, part of that law code. This comes from shortly after the Christianization of Scandinavia and Iceland.
No, Iceland was Christianized in about around the year 1000, and the Griegos was brought to Iceland in 930, so 70 years before Christianization.
But the law prohibited a woman from wearing male clothes, it prohibited her from cutting her hair like a man, and it prohibited her from bearing arms or in general behaving like a man. So that's a little reality check for the Vikings TV show depicting an army of lesbians. This was absolutely not accepted in the Viking Age, and being considered a lesbian was probably even...
I have to stop that. That's not really true. The Griegos, inspired from the Gulating laws in Norway, was inspired by the Gulating laws, not copied of. It was brought orally to Iceland, not written down. It was written down in 1117, the first time. And then there were lots of Christian laws added after that, as the new laws. And the copies that we have is from the 1260s. Meaning that these copies include both the pagan and the Christian laws, and it's sometimes really hard to know which one is older and which one is newer. So yeah, but the law says, it doesn't specify as much as he just said. It says if women deviate so much from custom that they wear men's clothes or some other male custom in any way that separates them from other women, the same goes for men, then the punishment is excommunication. That's what the law says. So if a woman is not acting as a woman, or a man is not acting as a man, and it's hard to see if are you a woman or a man or a woman, that could be reason for excommunication. It should be clear what's what. But this law is written in the marriage laws. And that's important, because you can't just take a text out of a law text or law book and apply it to any kind of situation, because this law is written in the laws of marriage. So if you were married, you should act like a man and a woman, not confuse the roles in that relationship. But if that also was law outside of marriage for men and women in general, even if they were single, I haven't found that anywhere, so I don't know. I don't think so. But you have to look at what law you are reading, because that's important. So this would mean that if you were a trans in a marriage, that would not be accepted. That would not be okay. You were supposed to be a man and a woman in a relationship if you were married legally. That's what this says. They didn't accept confusion, but it doesn't say anything about sexuality. Just the appearance is noted in the laws, not the sexuality. So we don't know anything about that. And doing something backwards could be seen as a liability to the sanity of the community, and that could be seen as a threat. And I think this is a law that came with Christianity, because the Christians feared something they call divine madness. And that's basically what this is, to confuse people of who you are and behaving backwards in some way. But that's another episode. It's a big topic. But there were absolutely female Vikings, female warriors. That's in the archaeological records. We have female graves with females wearing full armor and weapons. And there's nothing that says anywhere that females couldn't join a Viking raid. That's not true. That's a thing that remains from the past, from the 40s and 50s. So archaeology and history, that females in the Viking society were home taking care of the children, and the men were out fighting and warring, and came home after raping people. He came home to his wife, and he was the man of the house. That's not how it was. We've evolved since then, and we know that the woman's role in society was very strong, much stronger than in many other societies, and definitely much stronger than in the Christian society. The woman was the one who wore the keys. That is a very powerful symbol of leadership. That's just saying one thing, and that was in the marriage. She took care of the home when he was away. But that's in the marriage situation. Before you were married, you could do whatever you wanted. If you were fit as a soldier and they thought that you could join a Viking raid and actually contribute in some way, then I don't think they cared if you were male or female. So no.
More damaging to a woman's reputation than it was a man, if he was deemed to be gay in the society at the time. I'll give you one more, one pretty funny one. In the Griogos law code, on page 174, I don't have the text, but I'll see if I can put it up here. It deals with something called mera satsmetis, so great bodily injuries. If you inflicted great bodily injuries on someone, the punishment would be outlawry, so you could basically be killed. Now, great bodily injuries consisted of if you struck someone with an axe or a sword and their bone was showing, for example. Castration was considered great bodily injuries, but right there on the same law, right on the same line, something told as striking a shame stroke across someone's buttocks. Okay, so smacking a man in the ass was as bad as chopping his nuts off, and you can actually be killed for that, guys. It doesn't take a rocket science, or it doesn't.
Nope. No. The law says these bodily damages are seen as equivalent to greater wounds. If you cut a tongue out of a man's head, or prick his eyes out, or break the teeth out of his head, or cuts off his nose or ears, that's the greater wounds. But it's called cut if cartilage or bone is damaged, or if you whip a man or inflict a humiliating stroke over his loins. There were different laws depending on the extent of the wound. Great wounds, cuts, and lesser wounds. And they had different punishments. You cannot be killed for that. And as I said, a humiliating stroke over his loins is not a slap in the ass. The punishment was excommunication. That's the worst punishment they had. Before excommunication, the worst punishment, there was never a death punishment. You were never killed as a punishment for a crime. Excommunication was, it doesn't sound so bad for us, just leave the country and start over somewhere else, but that's, you can apply that kind of thinking to these times. Because being excommunicated meant that you could be excommunicated from the whole country. And that meant you have to be in another country. But if you went from Norway to Denmark, for example, the Danes wanted to know why you came there, why you wanted to settle there when you actually came from Norway. And they had contacts, and they learned that, oh, you're excommunicated for this crime. Okay, then you're excommunicated from here too. So you had to change country again. And you could only do that so many times before you didn't have anywhere to go. So it was a pretty horrible crime, a horrible punishment to be excommunicated. And that, as I said, meant that you were an outlaw. And outlaws were free game for anyone to kill without punishment. You've lost your human value, basically, by being excommunicated. So that was a pretty bad punishment. And if you're on an island like Iceland and being excommunicated, it could be difficult. Because, as I said before, it was a time-limited period before you were excommunicated. You had a certain amount of time to leave the country or the area. And if you're on an island and there were no ships going from that island that would accept you as a passenger, because they had the right to deny you to come aboard if they wanted to, then you were in real trouble. If you've been excommunicated, you're free game, no ship accepts you on board, then you're in trouble. So that was a pretty horrible punishment. It's not a death penalty, though. It's a difference. So a humiliating stroke over his loins is called a cut. And the law is pretty clear on that blood has to be a result of this cut or stroke. So just smacking someone's behind wasn't really the same as hitting someone so hard that he started to bleed and got a wound from it. So you couldn't be killed for smacking someone's behind. That's overinterpretation.
Take a PhD to see what they would have thought about homosexuality back then. Of course, they were a little bit homophobic, but I don't think it was super hateful. I'm sure gays existed. It could have happened. Yeah, I'm sure there were gays, and I'm sure there were. But it would have been so shameful to...
It's one thing to attack or strike someone or hurt, wound or kill someone, and it's a whole other thing for a man to prefer men instead of women. I don't think you can compare those two things. And saying if they had laws for wounds, just imagine what they did to gays. That is a logical fallacy using a what if situation as a probable fact. And that doesn't work well in academia. I don't think it was outlawed to be gay, but I do think that it made you an outsider, and that meant you had a pretty hard life ahead of you. But that was punishment enough. You're free to assume as much as you want and interpret however you want, of course, but I think he's wrong here. Because you can't compare having a sexual preference that didn't actually physically harm or damage anyone or hurt someone. You can't compare that to wounding someone badly by breaking bones or striking someone so hard that they bled badly. It's not the same thing, not even close.
To do that anyone who wanted to dabble in those things or, test out their sexuality, it would have been done so incredibly discreetly that nobody would have even known about it, most likely. Final note, a lot of people may say that, oh, just because we don't have any written evidence of it happening doesn't mean it didn't happen. Guess what, guys? The Christian authors of the sagas took every possible chance they could to slander their pagan ancestors, coming a couple hundred years before. If there was any gay acts known by society, known in history, or if there were any gay people, we would have heard about it. They would have written about it in the sagas non-stop. I agree with you sometimes that is the case, but the idea that, lack of evidence doesn't mean it didn't happen, that argument is not valid in this particular situation, so we can't say that. So that's
well, a lack of evidence isn't evidence in itself. That's but we don't know. But I basically agree with, if the Christian Norse could shame someone for a thing like gay behavior or something like that, I think, there would probably be stories about that. But we're free to assume and guess until otherwise proven. But so this was a lesson in how not to use sources. Sources are, as I keep saying, only good if used in the correct context. And it goes without saying that you have to read the sources you use, or you won't understand them. You can't cherry pick and just pull out one line of words from a book of text and try to use that as evidence. But okay, this was, I think, the end of this. And as I usually say, I actually like this guy. I watch his channel. I don't have anything against him at all. I think he could be better at his source finding and source reading, maybe. That would probably be beneficial for him. But he can do whatever he wants. I don't care. Go and check out this full episode if you don't want my talking over it. Do whatever you want. This was my take on this. Do you want to see more of these kind of videos? Then please let me know, so I don't sit here and do things that no one wants to see. Could maybe possibly keep it a bit shorter than I do, but I'm not good at doing short episodes. Should be fairly known by now. But let me know. And if you think that I was wrong in some of my arguments here, then please let me know that too. Just keep it clean and nice and friendly, because we're adults after all, and we can speak like grown people. So if you by any chance watched all the way to the end and all of this, I think you should actually subscribe to the channel. I really think so. You owe me that. But if you don't, But anyway, have a great day. Until next time, bye bye.